Everyone. Welcome to Ankur Consulting's Privacy and Cybersecurity webinar series. We're going to give everyone just a minute and a half to join and then we'll get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for Ankur Consulting's Privacy and Cybersecurity webinar series. We are joined today by leaders from our risk and compliance, strategy and performance, and visual communications practices. We wanted to bring us all together to discuss the ongoing implications of the COVID-19 virus and practical considerations as your organization faces cyber, risk, performance management, and resiliency challenges related to business continuity in light of this ongoing pandemic situation. We sincerely thank you for joining us during this time, and we look forward to hopefully providing some guidance and insight as you adjust and pivot to our new world at present day. During the presentation, the phone lines will be muted, and we ask that if you have a question to please submit via the Zoom chat feature. We will make sure to address on the fly or as we are able in the Q&A time at the end of the discussion. If time runs out, we will respond to all questions received via email. To provide some background on Ankur, we were founded in 2014 and are a young but rapidly growing management consulting firm with over 1,550 professionals spread across 37 global offices. The practices represented today showcase our unique ability to come at an issue from multiple disciplinary perspectives. As we worked toward pulling together this webinar, we realized how the virus impact was permeating throughout our client organizations and different expertise was needed to address the evolving issues our clients were facing. We hope that by sharing this expertise with all of you today that you will be better equipped to handle the challenges your organization is facing now and in the near future. The format for today's discussion will be 15-minute brief, high-level discussions on today's most pressing issues confronting organizations in light of COVID-19. My name is Tommy Taggart, and I am a managing director in the data and technology practice located in the Chicago office of Ankur. I co-lead the business development and marketing initiatives for our tech, privacy, and cyber risk advisory practice. It is my pleasure to introduce our guests and presenters today. First up, we have Tenery and Daron Hartvigsen. They will be kicking off as they discuss cybersecurity threat considerations. Luke is based in Chicago and is a senior managing director and the leader of our cyber incident response and investigations practice. Daron is a managing director based in our DC office, leading incident response, cyber investigations, and cyber threat analytics solutions. With that, I will turn it over to Luke and Daron.
Thanks, Tommy. And thank you so much for everyone joining us this morning. As we are well aware, everyone is compressed in new ways from a timing and balancing of work and life commitments. So we certainly appreciate any amount of time that you've offered up to us today. But in the same sense, we know that attackers have and will take advantage of this crisis, and not just how it's compressing those on the line. And I would imagine many of you are already somewhat accustomed to these updated working conditions, at least with more regularity, but also understanding that this time of transition and compression in people's schedules is also creating some level of opportunity for cyber actors and criminals looking to take advantage of that. In some elements, you'll see the timeline below, and as cyber investigators, intelligence specialists, and responders, we're called to often look to the past. We are heavy users of case study, prior incidents, prior crises, and being from Chicago, I can't help but mention that we're very well accustomed, at least in a political sense, of not letting a crisis go to waste. And so we know from a historical perspective that actors will look to do the same, not only in a public health crisis that we're walking through, and we see, you've probably already experienced some firsthand attacks or spam or other conditions that have had you on high alert. But you can imagine just the different aspects of society that could potentially be taken advantage of, and cyber is, and increasingly so, and we'll talk about more in a second, a primary avenue in which they're doing that. But firstly, looking to the past, we have a quick timeline here, and if you worked with Ankur before in our response or investigations capability, you know that we leverage the timeline heavily. The timeline tells the story to us. It allows us to go back and look at different attacker attributes and trends, and clearly, and we've had some level of record here, and we're actively monitoring in a number of ways. But you'll note the plague in Madagascar in 2017. We know that actors through phishing, fraud, and attacks, some of those on the West, pulling on sort of or in many cases are benevolent and altruistic heartstrings, but we know that they were looking to conduct wire fraud and that sort of pandemic or public crisis there, and then Ebola before that, similar emailing tactics, but also some aspects of malware and other phishing, sometimes malicious links, as many of you know, are used to harvest credentials or have the end user offer up some level of information. So, and similar tactics even in the mid 2010s and early 2000s with the swine flu and SARS, we even early days, actors were very active in terms of leveraging email and other sort of spam-like conditions. We've seen, as we'll talk a little bit more, some advancements in sophistication, probably goes without saying, in this current crisis. But again, we're looking to the past and also framing it up with aspects of this immediate evolution of the crisis and what it's doing to organizations, from a technology and also from a financial impact. And again, looking to the past, we and marrying that with how we're posturing ourselves from Ankur situational awareness and our leveraging of threat intelligence, we're looking at aspects of the prior downturn. The most significant one, obviously, in the late 2000s, the 08, 09 time period, we saw a whole host of interesting attacker activity, some of it external or existential in terms of actors finding new ways to steal intellectual property, misdirect funds, but obviously an increase in tactics to employ fraud, some newer age or greater prevalence of that now, and extortion, but still pulling on the strings of the economics, and we'll highlight a few areas around that here in a moment. And then finally, I don't think it can be downplayed enough, are aspects of the gig economy and how we are leveraging our remote telecommuting, collaborative, and similar platforms are creating new opportunity or in some cases just expanded opportunity as organizations are finding themselves and forced to take risks that they normally wouldn't take because of this rapid need to stay productive. Thankfully, we have all these tools now that are allowing us to scale and maintain productivity, particularly in our band of professionalism. But ultimately, there's some organizations that are grappling with new tensions and risk given the rapid movement to particularly online services. So already on the next slide, thanks, Tommy. A couple of elements here that I'll just mention. From a cyber threat intelligence perspective, just to kind of cover a few things, cyber threat intelligence and and the analytics that Ankur leverages around that provide situational awareness for our clients. Sometimes that's mid-incident, where we need greater visibility into a client's vulnerabilities. Perhaps they've already experienced or they suspect a data exposure or some type of incident. Our ability to monitor some of the more common channels and elements of the deep or dark web help give our clients some visibility into those sorts of issues. And not only that, in some cases proactively from a threat analytics and intelligence perspective, our clients leverage that information to defend themselves better and take proactive measures that might be custom to their industry or the types of enterprise and technology platforms that they leverage. But ultimately, we're providing this information for our clients to improve their decision-making, prepare, prevent, detect, and respond, and be more resilient. And we've been monitoring those things actively here in this crisis. And I'll note here that in the top 3 bullets, we already and have been at certain levels of unprecedented situational awareness and monitoring cyber threat intelligence in a host of new ways, and leveraging that. Our clients are leveraging that to defend themselves. I'll start kind of with the second bullet there from an alert standpoint and move backwards, but just a brief bit of more recent history. Because of the Iranian tensions in particular, it was very clear in early 2020 that organizations needed to take some additional security protections and preparedness and situational awareness around the Iranian tensions. We noted then that there were going to be certain aspects of potentially nation state sponsored attacks or other elements of criminal actors looking to take advantage also of those crisis-like conditions, combined with different regulator and enforcement agency alerts on how organizations could better prepare themselves. So at some level, there had already been levels of high alert across corporate America and in the enterprise, and cyber professionals in many cases have never been more well prepared for the task at hand. But at the same time, it takes on a new level of perspective when there's a broader crisis at hand. But currently, we're already seeing from an active attacker perspective, focused attacks on critical services. We've already seen, you've probably read headlines on different organizations maintaining critical services such as supply chain and food being attacked, or other defense or critical infrastructure systems. We've seen the same at Ankur. So we can confirm that. And further, we know there's active probing in this time of transformation from a technology perspective, that organizations, as they bring online new systems and capabilities or scaling them in new ways, actors are continually probing and monitoring, going back and looking at targets that they haven't focused on in some time, but rechecking and seeing if they have become vulnerable in any new ways. But with that, I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague, Daron Hartvigsen, who has some specifics on the tactics and techniques that are being employed, so you can, and your organization can have a better sense for some of the real-time specifics that are being employed across our industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke, and greetings to all who have joined us today. We are absolutely tracking an increase in cyber criminals taking advantage of recent world events to enable their exploitation of users and organizations. We are keeping a pulse currently and watching evolving tactics, and would like to highlight some recent social engineering examples for you here. As Americans began to empty shelves of hand sanitizer, a popular social media theme arose around making hand sanitizer at home. Criminals took advantage of this and crafted phishing emails and social media posts that included malicious links. Also, there are many examples of phishing emails with a COVID-19 theme that are designed to trick recipients into clicking on a link, downloading an app, or visiting a website. As we can see on the image on the slide, criminals did not wait long to craft campaigns that responded to real-time events as the U.S. government was considering a stimulus package that would give $1,000 to each adult. Soon after, criminals sent out messages trying to entice people to claim their $1,000 stimulus. Since many companies are trying to move to a remote workforce, criminals are attempting to take advantage of the migration by crafting emails masquerading as security information. And all these are just examples of ways for which actors will attempt to exploit our folks and get access to our systems. Next slide, please. Ankur has recently received intelligence pertaining to an uptick in highly targeted penetration attempts against cleared defense contractors supporting the maritime defense industries. Our critical infrastructures, as they attempt to respond to COVID-19 attackers, the potential for a new window of opportunity where system and network security may not be receiving the attention it deserves exists. Additionally, the rapid stand-up of a remote workforce could expose remote access protocols to threats where those accesses may not have existed before. Criminals and nation-state threats are testing human and technical defenses as we speak. So what can we expect in the coming weeks? We can expect increased brute force attempts and probing around soft targets such as infrastructure and the access for which remote workforce accesses that infrastructure. Actors will attempt to entice our workers and our workforce with scam and misinformation to access their credentials. The top image of this slide is one example. It's a fake email with a malicious attachment masquerading it as COVID-19 information. You may have heard or even visited the interactive dashboard created by Johns Hopkins University. It tracks in near real-time data from the World Health Organization to track the spread of the virus. Recently, criminals circulating links via social media, email attachments, and online advertisements to malicious websites that are disguised as the Johns Hopkins COVID-19 map. We can also expect increased social media exploitation and social engineering. We can expect a uptick in business email compromise, enabled fraud and scam attempts such as invoicing and payroll diversions. And of course, ransomware. Ankur as incident responders are already responding to ransomware events enabled by COVID-19 themed phishing. The FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center issued an alert late last week to warn people of fake emails claiming to be from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention or other healthcare organizations pretending to share information about the virus. So let's talk about active defense and what some are doing now. Many assert that passively waiting for a compromise to happen is no longer enough. Active and ongoing efforts to identify, suppress, contain are the new norm for successful network defenders. Network owners and defenders should be actively seeking out credible reporting from the FBI, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or others to maintain situational awareness and apply that awareness to help secure people and systems. Finally, successful network operators and defenders seek sources of near real-time threat indicators of compromise and implement defensive measures as a result of those indicators. As an example, endpoint monitoring and managed security services often serve this role. So with that, back to you, Luke.
Thank you, Daron. In conclusion, we appreciate your time again. And if there's anything that Ankur can do from a broader building of your situational awareness, your cyber threat visibility, we stand ready and prepared through not only just the current crisis as a resource in any way, but also we look forward to serving you in the future. Tommy, back to you.
Thank you both. Next up, we will discuss how to secure a remote workforce, giving practical guidance to ensure your remote workforce is not compromising the cybersecurity of your organization. We have Ankur, Sheth, and Jason Straight presenting. Ankur is a senior managing director in our New York office and leads our proactive cybersecurity services. He has been focused on cybersecurity for more than 15 years across a variety of competencies and is committed to serving his clients in successfully mitigating potential cyber threats. Jason Straight is a senior managing director and the chief privacy officer of Ankur. He is based in our New York office. Jason has extensive experience managing complex cybersecurity investigations and data breach events in a wide variety of industries. Ankur and Jason.
Thanks, Tommy. And thanks everyone for joining, and hope everyone's staying safe. So as we talk about this topic in securing the remote workforce with today's shift in our environment, there's been an additional risk created to organizations and threats that now exist based on what we just heard. Many organizations that we've talked to and we've seen in the news as well, were not set up to handle this shift from a general IT perspective, their infrastructure, their networking, et cetera, let alone were they really thinking about some of the additional security considerations that need to be thought of from working from home. So we're going to talk about some of the key topics when we think about securing a remote workforce. And as always, we break cybersecurity up into kind of three key categories, which is really people, process, and technology. And that still holds true whether we're in a crisis mode such as this or any other time. What we've highlighted on this slide, and we're going to dive into each of these areas a little bit more over the next 15 minutes, are some of the key concepts that apply to each of these verticals. So from a people standpoint, right, how do we train our employees to be aware of additional threats that are out there that Luke and Daron just mentioned? Phishing exercises, email impersonation, Trojan horses that may exist within emails. That becomes a really important piece. And while we have done training in the past, there's an additional training mechanism we want to think about to help during these times. From a process perspective, what are the policies that need to be enhanced or reinforced with our employees? So what are the working from home policies? What are the mobile device policies? Things like that may need to be updated as we move into a remote workforce. And then obviously from a technology perspective, how do we use technology to help secure the workforce? So, most of the companies we work with have some form of VPN, right? And ensuring people are using that. How do we potentially roll out MFA to further support access into applications in our network? Endpoint detection and response, I think we just heard about as well, utilizing that to help monitor and manage any threats that may exist. Patching and logging, as well as making sure that some of those core servers and firewalls, et cetera, have the right patches on them to remove and mitigate some of those potential vulnerabilities. And then actually providing information to our employees about what to do with their own personal networks, their own home networks, and how to utilize that to the best of their ability. So we're going to dive into each of these in a little bit over the next 10 minutes, and we'll start with Jason going into some of the management tips.
Yeah, thanks, Ankur, and hello, everybody. So, to some extent, the blocking and tackling that companies should be doing in normal circumstances, is still the same stuff you should be focused on today. The way you should think about this, though, is a shift in emphasis, and we're really going to focus in on, how our new work from home world changes your profile, your risk profile. And the way we talk about this in the security world is we talk about a change in a company's or an organization's attack surface, right? So that means the way your company looks to an attacker, to an adversary, is different than it was prior to the crisis. It has become larger and more dispersed, right? Because now you have people who ordinarily were centralizing themselves in one office location, largely using the same pathway to the internet and to different resources. Well, those people are now scattered around and using, if you're a large organization, hundreds or even thousands of different ways and paths to the internet. And each one of those presents a new aspect to your attack surface that can potentially be exploited. So, you need to adjust your defense strategy accordingly. Now, having said that, adversaries are human beings, and as such, they're very good at finding and taking the path of least resistance. So they're going to continue relying on the techniques and the tactics that have been working very well for them in normal times, right? So so really, again, it's thinking about how those same attacks, and we've already mentioned a couple times, phishing attacks, credential stealing, planting malware like Trojans and ransomware. These are the same kinds of things that we're seeing, you know, albeit at a faster rate because of the situation that we're in. So a couple of the things specifically that you want to focus in on, and given this reality, is, you know, number one, VPN, a virtual private network. That is the primary lifeline that organizations are using to enable remote work. Some organizations use Citrix as well, which is a similar but somewhat different sort of technology. But whatever your remote connectivity method is, it's important to focus in not just on the security of that connection, but also on the performance of it. And these two things are related. So if a VPN connection isn't providing the performance that an employee needs to do their job, so if there's a lot of latency, if they're locked out, they're unable to connect, they're going to find other ways. And the one thing you really don't want people doing when they're working from home is sort of, you know, ad hoc improvising ways to get their jobs done, because that's when bad things happen. Usually people start using personal devices, et cetera. So, you know, this is getting a little bit away from security, but really just monitoring the performance and the functionality of your VPN is really important. Looking at the kinds of traffic that's flowing through your VPN and making adjustments as needed. Most organizations have not put this much load on their VPN in the past. So really step up your logging and your monitoring of your VPN connection. You know, as a general rule, in a time of greater risk like this, you should pump up your logging and the retention of those logs, so that if something happens, you have more information to go on to go back and recreate what has happened. So another thing that it's a good time to do is look at and refresh your work from home policies. If it's been more than a couple of years since you've done that, trust me, they need updating. We do a lot of this work for clients, and, you know, again, if it's been 4 or 5 years, you'll see references to BlackBerries, you'll see references to dial-up networking, you know, MySpace. So definitely a good time to refresh and update, and then redistribute those policies, and make sure that you're explaining to your employees, you know, why these policies exist. They're not arbitrary, and they're exceptionally important right now. Multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication. So this is using a token, whether it's a soft token on a phone or a physical token that you have to enter a second factor in addition to a password. Most organizations are using two-factor authentication today. If you are not, I strongly urge you to consider it. It's typically not all that difficult to implement in an organization. If you're not sure whether you use it, ask your IT department, and it's really a great way to protect against some of these remote attacks that we see attackers engaging in. Next, you know, make sure your IT security staff and your general help desk staff are equipped and trained to answer the different kinds of questions and address the different kinds of risks that you're going to run into in this work from home environment. So that includes, you know, adjusting some of the detection rules that you're using. You know, what was abnormal behavior before this crisis might now be normal, right? So lots of connections from external IP addresses would have caused all kinds of alarms under normal times. Well, now that is normal. So you need to adjust your rules and your approach to monitoring and detection. Also consider supplementing your help desk staff with additional resources, making sure that the security team is readily accessible to your help desk staff, and really train them in real time, you know, through whatever mechanism is most convenient, whether it's daily briefings, to make sure everyone is staying current on the kinds of things that are occurring and that you're seeing. You know, generating FAQs, I'm a big fan of FAQs. To distribute to your help desk staff, or maybe even send out to your employee base to cut down on the number of questions that are coming in and the frustration that can result. Finally, you know, it's also a good time to validate and test your backup and recovery systems. You know, with this increased attack surface and you know, the load that you're putting on some of your systems that aren't used to it, it increases the odds that you're going to have some sort of failure somewhere. So if you haven't done it for a while, it's a good time to make sure that your backup and recovery systems are operational, functional, and that you're ready to go. And then finally, you know, communicate early and often with your employees on all these topics. Make sure they feel supported. They'll be much more productive and just generally feel better. Go to the next slide here. So what should you be saying? Well, I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes here a secure home network configuration guide. If you think about it, your organization is now only as secure as every home network of every employee that is connecting remotely. That is a very scary thought for most of us. So the way to address that, obviously, you're not going to send your security team out to everyone's home and help them, you know, configure a secure network. But there is some guidance that you can provide to people that's practical, that people can do on their own. And I'll show you an example of something that you may want to send out to your employees. And then, as I mentioned, you know, explain to your employees why it's important to use VPN. Explain why it's important, you know, why multi-factor authentication, even though it might be a pain, is extremely important. Again, if employees feel that a rule is arbitrary, they're going to try to find a way to get around it, and people are smart, and they usually can. But 99.99% of employees will do what you ask them to do to protect the company. They care about the company, they care about their jobs. So make sure they understand that they are part of, again, of this attack surface, and they have a responsibility to help you protect sensitive information. Provide guidance on password complexity and uniqueness. This is, you know, credential stealing, again, is a very, very common tactic used by virtually every attacker group. So the most important thing to remember with passwords and pass on to your employees is use unique passwords. Don't use the same password that you use for your, you know, online shopping that you use to log into your corporate network. Those are the kinds of things that get you into trouble. So unique passwords, complex passwords, and remind people that a complex password isn't necessarily one that's impossible to remember, to have a bunch of special characters and everything. But it's the number of characters, the length of the password that really matters. So use passphrases. There's a lot of best practices out there and guides that you can provide to people on you know, getting serious about their passwords. Extremely important right now. Also emphasizing how important it is to keep work devices and personal devices separated as much as possible. So the setup I'm using, I have my work laptop. I'm doing all my work on that. Obviously, I do have personal things to attend to, and we all have one eye on the news these days and communicating with family. I have my personal iPad sitting right next to me, right? So my laptop is connected through the VPN. My iPad is connected just through my home wireless router, and I keep those worlds as separate as I possibly can. That is extremely important to do. Don't share access to work devices with family members, right? Seems straightforward, but trust me, if you leave your laptop sitting on the kitchen table, I know if I did that, my kids would be on it, you know, when they sat down to have a bowl of cereal. So don't do that. I keep my laptop in my office. I don't leave it lying around the house. And it's not that my kids are going to do anything malicious, but they might navigate to a site that is infected, or they might click on, they log into their own personal email and click on something that is going to expose my corporate computer to risk. Explain the importance of limiting bandwidth flowing through the VPN. You know, make people aware that when they're connected through the VPN, all of their internet traffic is getting routed through the corporate VPN, and that creates load. And again, that's another reason why people should be using a personal device to do a lot of their internet activity. Provide guidance on authorized conferencing and collaboration tools. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. We may have experienced some issues with that ourselves this week. Emphasize the importance of using only authorized cloud storage and file transfer systems, right? So it's one thing to tell people that they can't use iCloud or Google Drive or Dropbox for business purposes, but if you don't provide them with an alternative that they can use, trust me, they're going to use those other platforms. So make sure people know how to safely access cloud storage and file transfer. Make sure people know how to get assistance and that they feel safe reporting an incident. A lot of people are reluctant to report something, especially if they feel that they had some hand in it. They clicked on a stupid email their brother-in-law sent them, and all of a sudden the machine's acting funny. They don't want to get in trouble, so they try to fix it themselves, or they, close their machine and go to lunch or whatever. You need to make sure that they're calling in and getting assistance. And then finally, phishing attack recognition. I'm going to turn it back to Ankur here, who's going to show you some examples. I think it's a great practice to send examples out to employees of stuff that you're seeing in your environment or that you see in the media. So Ankur, you want to take us through some of the more despicable examples we've seen?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So on this next slide, you'll see this is an actual email. And this just kind of expands upon what Luke and Daron were already talking about in terms of some of the threats that are out there and the phishing campaigns that are happening. This is one that we captured. Just want to show you, quickly that, a spoof from kind of the World Health Organization, right? So they're attempting to look like the WHO and provide information on coronavirus. And you can see there's also an attachment here as well. And there's lots of these going around as we've already talked about, and this is just kind of one example. On the next slide also is in more detail the specific item that Daron mentioned around Johns Hopkins, right? So this looks like the exact dashboard that Johns Hopkins provides to as a source for people who want to stay up to date on the virus. And what this is looks like the exact map, but really in the background there's a spyware that's running that's stealing usernames, passwords, credit card numbers, etc. Right? And this is same thing distributed through emails and online ads and social engineering. And I think to circle it back to Jason's point, the phishing training in general and providing even in this time of need just some additional guidance and points to employees instead of a full-on training exercise, maybe just saying, hey, think about 1, 2, 3, and 4 as you're looking at emails to make sure they're not phishing attempts would be helpful to just reinforce the scenario of what's happening right now. Next slide, please.
Yeah, and finally, we'll close on this. Obviously, I'm not going to go through this poster, but this is a poster that was created by the SANS Institute, which is a very well-respected security training institute. This was created by their Secure the Human initiative, and it wasn't created for purposes of work from home or coronavirus response, but it's something that I think is very appropriate, very timely to distribute to employees, just to give them some more specific guidance. I mean, most normal people don't really know that much about how to secure their home network. And this gives you a nice, sort of 5-step guide on how to do it. So we've got a link there at the bottom. I'm happy to email this to anybody if you want to reach out to me afterwards. But I think this is a great resource to send out to employees who are working from home and want to do the right thing and help protect the organization. Tommy, back to you.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Ankur. Next up, we have Duane, Lohn, and Gooch of our risk and compliance practice. Duane is a senior managing director based in our Phoenix office with extensive experience in advising risk, compliance, legal, audit committee members, and board committees on operational risk and resilience. He specializes in emergency and crisis planning, business and operational continuity management, data security, and cybersecurity within the critical infrastructure market. Corey is a managing director based in our LA office and has over 20 years of experience in risk management in the insurance brokerage industry, including almost 18 years dedicated to helping clients implement enterprise risk management and resiliency initiatives. As the managing director of ERM at Ankur, he is responsible for leading our enterprise risk management and resiliency client engagements. Duane and Corey.
Tommy, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So what we wanted to do was start off with how do we manage through this crisis? How do we manage an event? We'll start through that, and then we want to talk about, we'll show you some anecdotes and some real life examples, best practices of what folks are doing across the country in all different businesses and industries. So first off, we'll start off with, how do we manage this? This is our crisis management governance framework. So on top is our recommendation is with each organization, you set up some crisis management team, some governance, some it may be the board, it may be 7 to 10 members typically across different functions of the business. Set up some committee, a crisis management committee. That's the first thing to manage this event. Secondarily is if you look at the colored boxes down below there, emergency, pandemic, cyber, IT, business continuity, and crisis communication, those are the recommended best practice plans that organizations should have in place and need to have in place. Each one of those, a lot of organizations do not, or they may have, it hasn't been dusted off in several years, or, it hasn't kept up in time. So this is really, we're going to talk about two of those in a minute here. This is really how to set up our communications, internal and externally, notification, incident management procedures. How do we interact with all of our corporate and different business models we have, dealers, distributors, customers, all of that across the board. So this is setting up our recommendations to get some crisis management framework in place. We're going to focus on two specifically related to this, which are on the next slide. First off, pandemic plan. We recommend that every organization across every industry have a specific pandemic preparedness plan. That's a plan specific for what we're going through right now, and it's usually completed at a facility level. So if you have a headquarters, they would have a pandemic preparedness plan for the headquarters. Then if you have distribution centers, facilities, manufacturing plants, if you're in a law firm and you have offices, those type of things, we'd recommend to make sure you have a written, documented pandemic preparedness plan. And number two is the business continuity plan. And really, this is key. This is the playbook really for the business. It's how to keep the business functioning currently and being able to recover and be back in business faster. That's the key. That's the playbook. And within the business continuity plan, you have all your recovery strategies by department, by area, by business process, manual workaround processes, all our applications, all of our vital records documented and identified and tracked. Our IT disaster recovery plan can lay under that as well, which Jason just mentioned. You want to make sure, because infrastructure is being moved to other places, you want to make sure the back office gets moved and has the DR plan as well. But those two plans are absolutely critical right now. Corey, go ahead.
Thank you, Duane. I think and just to build upon what Duane said, because those two elements are important, and having the pandemic specific focus on the continuity plan is critical, because this is a situation that's different than what normal environments are going to be like. Typically, you think about most plans assume there's a loss of a single point of failure or possibly an alternative facility, whereas here we're looking at more of a systemic failure, and you have impact on the transportation side, on the workforce side, which we talked about, and you're dealing with impact to customers, to employees, and to the businesses as well. So we think about pulling out from not only just one risk area, but it affects all of us from an enterprise perspective. So dealing with the pandemic or an epidemic is actually an enterprise risk for our business and also for yours. And so when we really think about a pandemic or an epidemic, I mean, this is not a new risk. In fact, we've already heard examples going back to SARS or to the swine flu or Ebola outbreaks. It's an enterprise risk that has happened before. It's on many people's risk maps already. And when you think about it, it goes across multiple enterprise risk elements. So when you think about and we're seeing these impacting us exactly right now. So from a strategic perspective, how long is it going to last? How is it going to go? We saw just today, 3.3 million jobs were jobless claims this morning. So it's affecting us both on the people side as well as on the operations, and supply chains are seizing up. There are spiraling wage costs, absentees, our healthcare workers. So for the employees, we talked about the changes in working from home and those rules and the importance of that, not only securing us from a cyber side, but also how do we deal with the people aspects of this risk for for our employees. It's an entirely different work environment that they're perhaps not used to, and dealing with changes in productivity. From the financial side, we're seeing our businesses impacted with the giant fluctuations and volatility in currencies, interest rates, in the market environment overall, which is affecting possibly the credit rating side. And on the hazard side, when you think about this, there's a lot of questions. Are we really looking? There is no insurance for a pandemic under the traditional policies. So in a business interruption side, we have to think about how can we get back up and running. And from a business continuity perspective, that's how that plan helps you manage through that, because we're not sure how long this will last. How we would need to make sure that we follow state and federal regulations. If companies and cities and counties and states have now given us stay-at-home orders, so we have to make sure that we're in compliance. And of course, if there are incidents, and cyber incidents in particular, we're going to have to be in compliance with those types of regulations on a state-by-state, national, or global level, depending on where our operations are. On the next slide, please. When we talk about the potential impact to a pandemic, as I mentioned already, we don't know how long this is going to last. We hope that it will pass very quickly and they will start to slowly get back to normal. But we're also seeing that in China, it took them about 2 months to get back up and running. So when you think about it from the enterprise risk side, you have to look at it from various timelines and stress testing perspective to see what that could impact our business on. We need to look at not only if our customers can't come to or buy our products, how does that affect us? If we can't get our supplies, if our people can't work, because not all of us are in easy work from home situations. So that we need to think about those elements from a stress testing perspective. And I think it was already touched upon, the seeking the information and the leadership around that is critical. And that is part of the business continuity plans as well. That leadership, communication, and crisis discussions is absolutely critical, because without leadership and information, people will go to any source that they can. The team talked about, they'll find alternatives around it, and that's true. And within, you see probably from your customers and also from your own corporation, that leadership and the importance of those emails to get the word out about what we're doing to manage this risk is very critical. And then beginning to think about right now, in the middle of a crisis on the continuity side, when we come out of this, what could we do? We do not know what locations will be back up and running. We do not know what suppliers will still be there and operational, depending on how long this lasts. And we don't know what possible litigation or claims may affect us or our customers or our people. So we need to be thinking about those aspects right now to deal with this, in addition to those components. And Duane, I know that you got some very specific examples around the workplace too.
Sure. Let me talk about union contracts as an example. Unbeknownst to anybody, a lot of union contracts, we're dealing with several clients that have in their contract that XYZ workforce works at this plant, this facility, during these hours, these days, this is how they report, all of that. Well, all of those, in the environment we're in, the plant may be not there, the plant may be somewhere else. They've shifted production somewhere else, or the workforce somewhere else, or those type of things. So there's a lot of issues coming up with those, going forward. All of the alternate locations and all of that will be baked in. From an impact perspective, let me give you 2 examples. One's reactive, a company is reactive, and one's proactive. Reactive, we have there's a major online retailer, okay, that really was thinking about getting prepared, been talking about it, all this type of thing. And 80% of their workforce is millennials, and they're very successful. They're done very well. And really, during this process, they had to go to a work remote situation. Well, the workforce at their office has 2 big screens on their desk, along with their laptop. And there was an uprising because they're not going to go home unless they have 2 big screens, and thousands of people with 2 big screens going home. So long story short is limited to no BCP ahead of time. They had no documented business continuity plan, and no laptop policy, no mobile policy, no equipment policy, no pandemic policy, no workforce relocation policy in place. So they're having some, the impact is significant in terms of reformatting the business. The flip side is one of the largest ports in the western U.S., northwestern U.S., took a different approach and was proactive. Fourth quarter of last year, they actually we worked with them and developed a business continuity plan in detail, conducted risk assessments across their operations, across their 10 docks, et cetera. Completed the BCP, completed the business impact analysis, developed all their plans. Actually, the first week of December, ran a exercise with them at their headquarters, and the exercise was plan on being out for 30 days. That was one of the assumptions we all agreed to, and went through the exercise. What's ironic is, 2 months later now, 3 months later, they are on 30 days. They're all work from home and or elsewhere, and they've activated their plan. They've activated their crisis management framework. The business transitioned very, very smoothly and no impact to the revenue. They're still unloading ships and everything else. So 2 different approaches in terms of, getting the impact out the other side. One negative, one positive. A couple examples for everybody as well. We just wanted to show examples of what some folks are using in the marketplace. A lot of on the left side is a crisis management app we utilize to take all our content, our pandemic plan, our checklists, our business continuity plans, our survey of people. Are they okay? Are they working? Are they available? All of those things, polling, that type of thing. But there's 3 major companies as example, different industries. One of the largest cruise ship lines are using this technology along with all their plans. One of the largest hotel operators in the globe and a major retailer are all managing their crisis through the technology on the left. 60 different languages globally. 2 of them are massive global companies, and they can report, they have data, they can track, they have all their information and up to the minute. The nice part about that's going to be when they're done, they'll have all the after action information and what worked, what didn't, all that. On the right side is a different technology that a lot of our folks are using. Example there is in the state of Nevada, who we've heard and been on the news. Most agencies are using this technology on the left. The University Medical Center, the largest healthcare institution in Nevada, trauma center, is managing all their continuity of operations and business continuity through this tool, all their resources, contact information, all of that. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police, McCarran International Airport, Reno Airport, Clark County, City of Las Vegas, I could go on, but City of Charlotte, North Carolina, example, are all using technology to manage the crisis through the tools that we work with them on. And lastly, our recommendations. Really, I'm not going to read the list here. The key recommendation as you're going through this, twofold. One, we're getting a lot of calls. If you have plans you want us to review or look at or, make comment on or provide guidance on, we're available to do that to assist you through this crisis. And number 2 is, as you go through this, document all the learnings, what worked, what didn't work. The findings, things we want to capture all that in an after action report, AAR, and Ankur is going to be launching a detailed after action report once we get through this to just to provide a checklist to organizations that they take this information as learning and include that into their updated plans, updated thinking, updated thought process, updated protocols and procedures on a go-forward basis. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Tommy.
Thank you, Duane. Before you and Corey go away, we had a question come in that I was hoping you can answer. So it has to do with your crisis management app. They ask, how would an organization get access to that, and where would they find the web tools you mentioned for use?
So we can actually set up a demonstration for them afterwards. If they submit, we can set up a demonstration of them. We could show and have a conversation with them. We could show them both tools. There's other tools available as well, but we can actually walk them through the actual mobile app, and there's a UI tied to that as well, and the web-based tool, we can walk them through that as well. So we can do that offline. More than happy.
Follow-up question, is it a third-party tool, or is this something that Ankur team members have developed?
Yeah, so we have developed both of those exclusively with those tool providers. It is a third party, but our content, our methodology, our approach, and everything is that meets. By the way, all of our methodology in developing plans meet ISO 22301 standards, global standards, and Disaster Recovery Institute global standards. So the plans meet up to regulatory, compliance. But we developed the content exclusively with them, and we're their implementer and provider of them.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Duane and Corey. We're now going to shift our perspective a bit and turn to our strategy and performance practice leader, Beth Chase. Beth is a senior managing director based in our Nashville office and has over 25 years of experience helping organizations navigate change. As a trusted advisor, she partners with leadership teams of Fortune 500 and private equity-owned companies to identify, create, and implement strategies for value creation and transformational change. Beth was the founder and CEO of C3 Consulting prior to its acquisition by Ankur. Beth will discuss with us how best to manage your team during this turbulent time. Beth?
Thank you, Tommy, and appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone today. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the people side of this equation. And, why is this important right now? While many of us are working in a global or virtual team environment already, today presents very different challenges to everyone. Not only the technology and security challenges that have already been discussed, and really business continuity challenges, but people-related ones. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes giving some thought around that you can take back to your businesses and organizations. Teams are faced today with 2 to 3 times plus workload. Not only are they working to run the business, but they're also leading and executing on new projects to advance or accelerate the business, perhaps in a different way, given the turbulent environment. Also managing multiple crisis situations, not just the health situation, but also the implications on the business. And then figuring out the new work environment with pets and family and other obstacles at home to deal with. So this topic is really a short topic for anyone who continues to try to leverage this new normal to drive work forward. It's never been more important to focus extra effort on the people aspects of the projects and the environment, and not just the technical one. At Ankur, our team leads large-scale change initiatives around the globe, and so we thought it would be helpful to pull together some best practices in leading virtual teams during times of these. Let me just run through each one very briefly. The first one is fostering community. When we're face-to-face in a physical work environment, we have hallway time, and it's really important to build in that virtual hallway time in today's work environment to make sure that we've included the human side of the equation and not forgotten that as we're distanced from one another. So critical to continue to foster community in small ways, like starting off conversations with some small talk and just hearing how everyone is doing to keep people connected. The second point that I would give you is that it's critical to train the team and communicate new rules of the road in the remote workforce. There's some really easy ways to train the team. Doesn't have to be anything big or formal, but actually sharing best practices on team calls around how to leverage the technology that everyone is using today, perhaps much more than they were using before. So taking time at the beginning of video calls to share across the people participating on how to leverage the tools in front of us so that we can be most productive. The third point that I would make is to enforce and reinforce accountability inside and outside of meetings. There are a lot of different ways to enforce accountability, but we would encourage you to continue one-on-one meetings and cadence. Really have someone take great meeting notes and do follow-ups, and assign roles in meetings like note taker and facilitator to keep people engaged and to keep things moving along and productive. The fourth point or best practice that I would mention is to understand and communicate role expectations through this new environment. In reality, we have a number of shifting or changing roles and priorities given the run the business, new projects, multiple crises. So really being overt and intentional around setting or resetting role expectations and recognizing different work patterns are really critical as we have changing priorities and double, triple priorities on everyone's plate. The fifth one is leading with empathy and remembering the human side of the equation, recognizing that each of us have not only work challenges today and workload challenges, but health risks and concerns, not only with ourselves, but family, financial pressures and social isolation, keeping the human side and really talking about those things that we often don't talk about in a work environment, leading with the heart during this period of time and having grace there. And the sixth is leveraging the right technology. I know for myself, we're leveraging emails when we maybe should just pick up the phone. So emails, chats, texts, phone calls, collaboration platforms, video conferencing, really stopping and rethinking and setting new norms for those. When should we use email versus pick up the phone, and encouraging people to leverage video as much as possible to keep that human connection. If you'll go forward one page, I'll just tell a quick story. It's incredibly powerful to use video. This is actually a town hall that I held with our team of 150 people in strategy and performance. And it brought back the human touch and the connection that we all needed. We're also working with so many global businesses, often outsourcing their program management function to us to drive their big strategic initiatives forward. I'll give you a specific example. Working with a global essential retail business, we're leading their program management office, driving digital initiatives forward. We facilitate virtual brainstorming sessions using whiteboards, polling, Q&A capability, and other technology capability to keep teams engaged and interactive, as well as having virtual town halls, virtual team updates, and Q&A. So lots of different ways to bring the people side of this back into focus to make sure that we're driving the work through people during this critical time. It's really never been more important to focus on this human connection and over communication. And I hope the 6 tips that we gave you are helpful as you continue to find this new normal. Thank you. And back to you, Tommy.
Thank you, Beth. We had another question come in asking for a copy of the presentation, and we will be sending out the PowerPoint along with the webinar, so you will be able to disseminate to your leadership team Beth's 6 suggestion points. So now we are going to go back to our cybersecurity practice and have Bob Olson present additional real-life examples. Bob is our global tech, privacy, and cyber risk advisory leader. He is based in our Baltimore office and has over 25 years of experience developing, implementing, and managing complex cybersecurity and information technology enterprise risk management programs. He has served as a Chief Information Officer and Chief Information Security Officer for clients across a diverse set of industries and organizational sizes. He is a leader in the provision of reactive data analytics and proactive cybersecurity services to government, private industry, and non-for-profit clients. Bob is also a serial entrepreneur and adjunct professor of cybersecurity at Johns Hopkins University.
Thanks, Tommy. So hopefully to tie all the great best practices and advice that we've learned from the other panelists, just thought it'd be helpful to give a couple real life examples, again, just to sort of really drive the point home. And hopefully there's a couple examples. One is a large global firm, which we'll walk through first. And then another is sort of the other end of the spectrum, a smaller financial services firm. So, hopefully a lot of this aligns with your organization, and it'll give you a little bit of a window into what, at least how a couple of different organizations have approached it. So a little bit of a high level overview, kind of looking back. So first example, fairly large global manufacturing firm. As you can see, they've got a pretty good size corporate office staff, all in a fairly large central office park on the West Coast. In spite of all that, they really have not historically used, VPN other than for, more remote IT administrative type services, as well as some of the key executives have used it. It's just not something that they've ever really, implemented or rolled out. They have fairly recently, and recently being within the last, I'd say about 4 months, begun implementing Office 365 and kind of moving more towards a cloud-based environment. They also have probably the largest set of initiatives that they have in the firm is moving a couple hundred legacy applications on a variety of systems and different infrastructure models to the Amazon Web Services environment. They do have a fairly robust but general telework policy that's in place, and it's really just as part of their, again, at a very generic level, their corporate information security policy. And then also in a similar vein, their security awareness training, they have a formal program, but it really doesn't do justice, especially given today's circumstances, to the level of detail and insight specifically around, teleworking in a secure and safe manner. So some of the things that they did right out of the gate, literally over just the last few weeks. So they are using their, they have a fairly generic business continuity plan, and they've used that as a guide for, they've essentially treated this like the crisis that it is. They are now in the mode of, developing a detailed plan of action specifically around, okay, if this is sort of the new normal, even if this is the new normal for only, another month or two, a lot of the things that they did as an organization to, try and maintain as close to 100% operational capability as possible. Those were very short-term, sort of in the heat of the moment kind of decisions. And so they're now looking at, what should we be doing, either to strengthen some of the decisions that we made and or, operate more optimally and make sure that we're going to maintain, be a viable business. Significantly strengthened and expanded a lot of the stuff that Jason and Ankur shared around telework best practices. How do you securely work in a remote location? Again, recognizing most folks are working in their home, and understanding all the vulnerabilities and challenges and risks that come with working in a home environment. Picture this, they've got a corporate office campus where for the most part, every employee has a desktop, and in some cases, as well as laptops. Now, all of those endpoints, all of those computers are now sitting, in, potentially 2,500 different locations. Remote management of that, remote monitoring and security, really becomes a challenge and a concern. And so they, dramatically, we help them really kind of expand and ramp up and increase the coverage to 100% of all endpoints. They did accelerate their rollout. So they were on a fairly, I would say, conservative kind of plan, if you will, from a project timeline. That was accelerated dramatically, while at the same time, they also accelerated the security controls audit of that platform. We helped them implement, security awareness training modules specifically around, all of the things that come with all the considerations with securely and privately working remotely. That was rolled out through an online platform, very easy to push out, very easy to tailor it to their community. There were certain individuals or certain departments, finance as an example, again, they had really never been allowed to work remotely. So for those departments, we developed and delivered some more advanced training. Again, just more heightened things to look at, things to consider, and then also worked with them to increase their VPN infrastructure capacity, because again, they were not set up for 100% of their employees to be working remote. Some challenges that they're struggling with that we're working through. Again, you've got now 2,500 users that are now sitting in 2,500 different locations, and all of the challenges that come with just connecting devices to their home networks, to printing, all the normal non-security related IT demands have created a significant burden on their IT team. And it's really been a little bit of a distraction for them from the vigilance that they were maintaining on the security side. They've also, as Jason mentioned, you now have probably 2,500 external IP addresses that are all of a sudden now being flagged. And so there was a significant increase in endpoint monitoring. So we're supplementing what they're doing with our team. They are, one of the things that they're struggling with is trying to, the priorities right now from an AWS migration perspective are a little bit different given the circumstances. And so they're contemplating kind of reprioritizing and really replanning some of those migrations to try and bring those systems that are more critical, and lend themselves to more of a remote working capability or capacity in light of the crisis. And then one of the challenges that they face, and we see this across the board, is there's a scarcity of resources. So every company, every organization is struggling with this. One of the things that's fortunate about our model is we're essentially 100% able to perform, provide all of our capabilities and services just because of the platform that we have in place. So for us, from an operational capability and delivery perspective, there's been very minimal impact to our clients, but that's not true for a lot of the vendors that are out there, and particularly the vendors that are a little bit smaller and maybe don't have the large footprint and a large staff. So that's kind of one large, again, more global enterprise level. Here's sort of the other extreme. So this is a small financial services firm up in the New England area. It's about 50 employees. As you can see, they work out of, everybody works from one central office. They did implement O365 several months ago, but they are still, kind of getting used to that as part of their normal kind of work cadence. Did not have any kind of a telework policy in place, even a generic one. Just in the early stages of working with them to start building and implementing their security awareness training program. And then they didn't have any, BCP or continuity operations plan in place. So some of the things they did, Jason mentioned this specifically earlier, and others have as well, Luke and Daron, multi-factor authentication, one of the most powerful things that you can do. Huge believers in it. It's not, it's not 100% bulletproof, but it's pretty close to, and hackers are going to go where it's easy, and that just adds one layer of complexity that they'd rather not deal with. So their O365 environment we did a security controls audit, and then helped them in a thoughtful way implement, MFA. Started developing, again, they'd never even thought of continuity of operations. It just hadn't, occurred to them. So, we're looking at what does that look like right now, looking ahead just for the next few weeks or months, however long this lasts, but then what should it really look like in an ongoing basis? They, both worked with them to develop both a telework policy as well as a guide for securely working in a remote location. One little suggestion or tip, employees' policies are always viewed as sort of a negative. They're kind of like, rules of the road or law, and most people don't think too, fondly of those. And so a lot of this, we purposely call it a guide, similar to the, secure the home graphic that Jason had shared earlier. And it's really meant to be a tool that the employees can use. So it's not that, corporate is saying, here are the rules of the road. I mean, we kind of are, but we're doing it really delivering the message in a little bit of a different and hopefully a little bit more palatable way. They didn't have really any security endpoint monitoring, other than some basic stuff. And so we are providing security endpoint monitoring for them. Same thing, security awareness training, again, using the same platform actually as the previous example to deliver security awareness training, but specifically focused on the current situation and circumstances. And then for them in particular, they've actually had a number of clients reach out and ask what they are doing to maintain continuity of operations and do it in a secure fashion. So there was several pieces of collateral that were developed to really kind of describe that to their client base without giving away too much information, but also being fairly realistic and honest. Some challenges that they're facing, which is a little bit, a little unique. Again, most of their staff, with a couple exceptions, have never really worked remotely because they were never allowed to, just because of the nature of their business. And so they've struggled a little bit more than probably most on just, what does that even look like? To Beth's point and some great tips in Beth's piece, how do they continue to function as a team and continue to move forward? And then they outsource, probably not unlike a lot of companies that are out there today, and a lot of clients that we work with. They have an outsourced IT provider who are, in a lot of cases impacted by this as well. They're also being flooded with, a significant increase in help desk type tickets. And so it's definitely hampered them a little bit, and caused some challenges for them from a, responsiveness and, kind of ability to get things resolved quickly. So with that, Tommy, I will turn it back over to you. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you, Bob. Very helpful information. I'm sure it's reassuring to our audience to hear how both large and small organizations are doing their best to secure their enterprise. Lastly, we have time for just one question, and I'm going to direct this at Bob Olson, if he doesn't mind. Given the increase in use of webinar technology to host virtual meetings, are there specific security concerns we should be aware of or alert our teams to? Are we secure in using these platforms for confidential discussions?
Yeah, Tommy, thank you. Yeah, I mean, everybody's there's a variety of platforms that are out there today. Obviously we're using Zoom, but there's Teams, there's Skype, there's, Slack has the capability, there's some other Google Hangouts. I think it's important that organizations share whatever platform you're using, making sure that you're providing a guide to your employees, that you're making sure that they are, changing the default settings and making it as secure and as private as possible. There's lots of articles. If you do a quick Google search, you can find a lot of articles that, cause a little bit of concern probably for organizations when it comes to the privacy and the security behind some of the platforms, and they're all somewhat equally guilty. Don't assume that your employees will know what to change. Again, you probably have, a small group of super users that will take the time and, understand and know what they need to change. But at the end of the day, you're as strong as your weakest link. And so odds are most employees are not going to know what settings that need to be changed. Most of the platforms have security guides, so you can kind of do a quick search. And then just, you want to reinforce some of that, security awareness stuff, just making sure, we've seen instances of phishing emails going around with like fake links and stuff to different, platforms that folks are using. So just remind your folks to be really cognizant and really, really doubtful, if you will, skeptical when you get it, and just doubly check and just make sure, maybe even pick up the phone and give someone a quick call just to validate.
Thank you, Bob. To wrap up, we'd like to thank you sincerely for joining us today. We will be sending out a copy of the presentation along with a recording of the webinar within 48 hours. Our team is available to further discuss any of the topics we touched upon today, and contact information for each of our leaders will be included in the materials we send. Our next webinar in the Privacy and Cyber series will be held on April 15th and is entitled Ad Tech and Privacy, Managing Risk in a Complex and Evolving Digital Economy. We wish you health, safety, and sanity in the days ahead. Thank you again.